Right. Thank you all very much indeed for coming back. We'll do this for about 10 minutes to about 15:15. It's been a long session, but I see that some of my colleagues have already got questions that they want to put to you. So let me turn. Anthony, you haven't had a bite at the cherry yet. So why doesn't Anthony Mason, who's one of our independent experts, kick us off?
Is this working? Yes. I'd actually like to pick up a theme from the last question, because I think this is a theme about looking to the future of housing management as opposed to thinking about how good or bad things were in the past. So I am interested in the extent to which tenants and officers working in housing can see housing management developing as being something that wraps itself around tenants rather than wrapping itself around properties. So what more can we do for the people who live in our homes to improve their life chances and so on and so forth? Because I have a sense that's one of the keys for the future.
You're not all obliged to speak, you know, so why don't we have one from each, or whoever's inclined to do it. Stephen, do you want to have a go?
Happy to, Chair, thank you. I think we would welcome the opportunity to do that as officers. I think one of the constraints, which was a part of the theme earlier, was that we are set up in such a way that we are now currently learning to sort of adapt to move it forward. And I think with the engagement that has been taking place over the last sort of 9, 10, 11 months in terms of the residents, we're starting to actually get more feedback in terms of what residents need and what residents want moving forward. I think the other issue from where we come from as well is that I think we need to explain ourselves better in terms of what we can and can't provide, because I think there is a perception sometimes that within the housing department we can do everything and be everything to all people, and I think we have to have that mutual understanding of what we can achieve, and I think that will be a good starting point. There is still the statutory obligations that we do have to provide as officers, and I think we mustn't miss that sort of side of what we do. But I think we would welcome, because we are in people's lives 365 days of year, and that's probably more than any other department within the council. And I think from a resident's point of view is that when we're actually dealing with individual residents' issues or problems or concerns, what we want to be able to give them is the confidence knowing that it's going to get resolved. And I think the point that was made a couple of sort of questions ago was that, you know, most people want to be passionate about where they live, you know, and how they enjoy with their community. And I think if they feel they have that support, and I think it is a support function, you know, secondary is the knowledge that we all have. And I think that's what we would welcome in terms of moving it forward. And I think the level of engagement at the moment is such that it should actually get us to that position.
Susanna or Ross, anything that you'd like to add?
I just very much liked the fact that you have employment and training on your estate, and it also breaks down the divide, which I think we still have a bit here, them and us. It's the residents sort of and the council, and yours seems to sort of mesh together, and it's very much a two-way process, which I think is very healthy.
Could you pass the mic over in that direction? Ross?
I'd like to add to that as the fact that the strapline to the tenants' conference that we held was moving forward together, and I think that is very important, because I agree with Suzanne, it's seen as them and us, and I think it's really important that we do move forward together, because together we can achieve things, and that's apparent from what you've said there, that it's a situation. And for instance, on training, and I have banged on about this for ages, that when new initiatives come up, that tenants and residents and officers are trained together. So it's not residents being trained or shown what's happening, and then officers being shown and trained what's happening. It's a situation they're chained together so they can thrash it out in the training, and everyone moves forward together on an even keel.
Jim, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think anything's possible when the tenants tell us that's what they want. So, for example, two very quick examples. We're disused allotment, lots of disused allotment sites, and one of them they've turned into a community garden with our help, and I've got the first 7 bottles of wine on my desk, which they paid for, and we're going to have it in a wine party when we pick next year's grapes this September. And the second one is We would never have been able to build what we're doing now, and because the residents said we wanted extra care housing, and we're building our first scheme, which is 62 units for elderly people, really beautiful flats, award-winning design now, that is going to have a restaurant and everything there for elderly citizens.
Thanks, Jim. Chateau Lewisham, that's unexpected. Paul, you wanted to come in.
Probably one for Stephen and Jane again. You talked about measures of your services and doing surveys about how the services were and getting negative feedback that wasn't really helpful. I want to know, one, how is that feedback treated? Is it disregarded entirely as not relevant at all because it's not helpful? Second part also, you also talked about not really actioning some of the feedback at this stage. What plans are in place to kind of respond to the feedback you've been getting?
Please, Stephen.
Okay, one of the points that I didn't sort of quite clarify earlier is that the level of engagement is a percentage of the overall sort of service that we provide. So one of the things we want to do is actually go out and get interaction with a great many more people, more residents, to actually get a true picture of what the service is actually going to be provided. As I touched upon earlier, Councillor Coleman has made it quite clear that this year customer service and, if you like, satisfaction is going to be key in terms of trying to identify moving forward. And he's actually commissioned us and my officers to actually work with a group of residents to actually really look at what we want to try and achieve and what we actually want to capture as part of that sort of ongoing engagement. If you like, the ultimate for me would be, if I can, is to engage with the majority of people across the service that we provide, and I think that will give us a true picture, and then we will learn lessons from some of those, if you like, historical mistakes. I mean, one of the points that was made earlier was about, you know, it's quite emotive when residents are expecting something to happen and failure happens at a very, very low level, and they're the sort of things we actually want to try to sort of iron out moving forward. We will never, you know, I'll say now, we will never absolutely get everything perfectly right, because that's the nature of the world we live in. But if you can actually start identifying that we're actually learning and continually learning from the lessons that people are bringing to our attention, then I think that's where we want to get to. And at the moment, I can guarantee you, we don't actually learn lessons from all the things that we get wrong. And I think that's part of the issue. It's about greater engagement with the residents, and then a learning and feedback process that we actually learn from the lessons, and then tell the people that have actually given us the information, we've learned from this is what we've done, and this is the action plan that we've put in place to further develop that. And I think it's that two-way communication that we need to further develop as well, because at the moment we don't actually respond to a lot of the, if you like, the concerns that are raised. We respond to some, but not all of them.
Just say, you said you don't respond to some of the things you've done wrong.
Sorry, we respond to everything that comes through in terms of a complaint or inquiry in the right way. But what we don't do is we don't capture that level of information and then feed it back to the wider community about some of the lessons learned. You know, like similar to a you said we did sort of approach. At the moment, communications is limited in terms of how we engage. We did a similar exercise at the tenants conference in terms of feeding back and giving some general information. We need to get smarter about how we capture the information, respond to it, deal with it, and then move on, but also about feeding that information back. And at the moment, that communication gap, I think, is also causing us the problem. Because if people don't believe that what they're telling us is actually being listened to, that equally gives people that poor perception, and we need to really get to grips with that.
Okay. Susanna, did you want? You're not obliged. You're not politicians. You know, you don't have to talk.
Just very briefly, the communication that goes on now depends on literacy, and I've recently discovered, because my daughter is going to volunteer as a literacy tutor, that there is a surprisingly high level of illiteracy in the borough, and how you can address this, I don't know, but it needs to be addressed. That people who do not have reading and writing skills are simply being left out of most communication.
I know exactly what you mean. My wife was once a literacy tutor in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. Anthony.
Hello. Yes. I knew I was going to be asking a supplementary question. This is aimed at the two officers. And I wrote down 2 words, well 3, but responsibility and accountability. I wanted to ask you, because I live in Shelton, as you know, and we have a much more direct contact with our housing officers. And one of the issues we have is their responsibility to us and how they are accountable for our health and well-being. And I'd like to know how you see that going in the future, how you make housing officers, and this can apply to general needs as well, obviously, because our first point of contact is usually with our local housing officer, either in the housing office or on estates. So what I'd like to know is how you see responsibility, greater responsibility and accountability by your officers going forward.
Okay, I think from a senior officer point of view, I think one of the issues that I've come across since my time at Hammersmith and Fulham, I think there's one of a difference in culture. I think there are some officers alike and some that have come and gone that don't really understand the level of engagement that is required of their specific post. So there are a lot of good officers, and I think I mean, Janie might want to sort of comment on this. And again, back to my earlier point, there's been a lot of churn. There's been a lot of turnaround in staff, and I think it's about building those relationships, but also empowering staff. And I think historically, some staff have felt not empowered or not able to make the decisions that would actually add value to the residents and the community that they serve. So I think us as senior officers, you know, along with the administration and indeed residents, in trying to change slowly that sort of culture. So we are committed to obviously giving people the tools and the ability to make differences at all levels and to feel confident in their ability to sort of do that. And again, I think there is a cultural issue simply because some people feel nervous about making decisions. And one of the things I've always said to all of my staff is that if you make decisions for the right reasons, you know, don't be afraid to sort of do that and sort of taking it on. But it does have to be an ongoing process, and you do tend to find that, you know, there are every so often individuals who just can't make that leap. And I think from our point of view, in terms of delivering services, we want people who are there to make a difference to residents in their daily lives, but also not feel afraid in terms of making those sort of changes. So we are committed, and I think in terms of the new administration, again, about making improvements to certain parts of the division, I think you will start to see a change. I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but we are obviously moving in the right direction.
Stephen, thank you for what I thought was a very interesting answer. Very conscious of time now, and I've seen 2 of my colleagues have caught my eye. I've got Joanne and then Shirley. Joanne, why don't you go first?
Thanks. Stephen, just building up from the issue about staff and development, training, engagement, can you tell us a bit more about how you go about doing that at Hammersmith and Fulham, and perhaps what your aspirations would be for the future to really build skills and capacity and culture?
Okay, yes. Well, obviously, like any organisation, we have the appraisal process. So there is the ongoing engagement on a regular basis on a one-to-one level in terms of setting individual targets to meet the overall objectives of the sort of the organisation. In terms of housing, obviously, customers, the residents, and tenants and leaseholders are primary to the work that we do. And I know that my point was picked up on earlier in terms of the generic approach, and I think as housing professionals, you are skilled in a range of activities, but you're not necessarily qualified in any one sort of particular area. And I think one of the things we try to instill with our officers in terms of moving forward is about the level of knowledge that they have has to be partly down to the nature of the job that they do, but also it's about their own personal development and what their aspirations are as officers to not only promote themselves internally. And unfortunately, sometimes we do actually get some really good staff who then go on to bigger and sort of greater things. So it's about their own individual personal development, and some of those are residents in the borough as well. So it's twofold: their community sort of engagement processes as well as their own personal development. And then I think it's the traditional sort of management to make sure that they are given the support. And touched upon earlier, you have to make money go further nowadays. So it's looking at activities that you can share. The point that Ros made about maybe sharing training with not only resident and community groups, but officers as well. We also look to leverage in additional training through our partners, so through Mighty and Pinnacle, where they can also invest, not only from a training perspective, but an apprenticeship perspective, but also putting some money, and the money that they earn through the work that they do within the borough, the contracts are set up in such a way that they have to reinvest back in. So again, as an example, Mighty employed roughly 20% of their workforce live in the borough. So that's the sort of aspirational side of it. But back to the sort of individual personal development, there will always be an element that for whatever you put in place, you won't always be able to get everyone to get to grips. And I think they're the sort of managerial conversations that we have to make sure we put the best people in the best places to serve the customers as a whole. So it's an ongoing process, but one of the issues we have to do is trying to get the broadest of training across all of our areas. And there are some specific areas in terms of dedicated officers, especially in supported housing, that need to know that extra bit, extra level of work. But we are keen to continue to encourage, and where possible, we will leverage in and obviously work with the residents as well.
And last but by no means least, Shirley.
Hear me now? Yeah. Jim, particularly in Phoenix, obviously being a resident-led organisation, that means you're absolutely dependent on getting enough residents actively involved and a broad range in order to, or ways of those residents representing all residents. Do you have any advice for us? So irrespective of whether the residents in this borough elect to stay with the council or to go for a community gateway or some other kind of stock transfer, how do you go about doing that? And how do you envisage that being a problem for the future? Has it been a problem in the past?
I remember I was invited to Sutton with me and Dave, the vice chair, when they were looking at a similar thing, and the tenants said to us, no one here is going to get involved, and it was all really doom and gloom, and they said, well, Dave said, we only started off with 3 tenants, and then it was hard work, but we believed in it. And Sutton decided not to go for something like that, and they got taken over by a big housing association, and I think it was a terrible shame. And I'm sure they're getting a good service, but there's a fantastic opportunity for tenants to take control of their areas and to work in partnership with the staff. And one of the most exciting things I've seen recently is we had a staff election, because we have tenant elections. So anyone can stand up to be a tenant representative on the board, and you go through a process of election. We're just coming up to it, but we recently put a staff, and the residents agreed to have a staff rep on what we call the Gateway Committee, and loads of staff got involved. And it's important that the staff encourage the residents as well, and they feel that they work together. And I think that's something we've really learned, and it's been a great thing. When we started off, there was people who only thought, well, the elderly, it was always the same profile. The elderly, generally one type of our community was being more active than the other. I said, how can you get younger people involved? How can you get people with children and all that? And over time, through lots of hard work and different things, like the academy, where we've got much younger people coming through, a whole range of people got involved through the academy, people that are at university, people that are working elsewhere, people that are at college. So they've brought their children along, and they've joined the new scrutiny committee. They're going to be the new members. And the tenants are very conscious, as we all are, of succession. So we've been going 7 years now, and the chair and the vice chair and a number of the tenants have served their term in a year. And we've worked very hard to bring up other people. So there's always someone who's shadowing someone, and the tenants are brilliant at making sure that there's someone that's going to succeed them, and it's about encouraging people. So all I would say is on that, if people believe in something enough, and you have a vision and you can inspire other people, then I would say anything is possible. So you get many people involved.
Well, there's a good ending. Anything is possible. Will the witnesses just stay there, because I want to say thank you to you in due course. Now, you'll see on your agenda that I'm supposed to provide a summary and conclusions. Well, you'll be intensely relieved to know that I do not intend to speak for more than 60 seconds. But just to say that a couple of days ago, as part of my tour around the estates of the TRAs in the borough, I was on Philpott Square, and I was talking, I think, to the chair of the TRA there, and we came away from that meeting saying there are 3 things that need to be better. Consultation between residents and the council needed to be better. The communication, certainly between the council and residents, needed to be better. And coordination between departments certainly needed to be better. So there were 3 C's there. But as the evening has gone on, and we'll all have drawn a lot of different conclusions from what we've heard this evening, 3 more C's have occurred to me. One is closeness, and the importance that if you are providing offices and providing services, they need to be close to people so that people can access them better. That's another C. Then a point I think that Ros raised, which is continuity. You don't want the officers chopping and changing all the time. You want to be able to deal with one officer who knows the background of the case, you know, and is on top of the case and can actually deliver the result. So that's 5 C's, and then there's a final C, which is the C that Jim has, absolutely brought to our attention this evening, and that's the C for community, because community is at the heart of it all. I think in Phoenix you have achieved that. So I say that we have the 6 C's to take away from this meeting. There'll be many other conclusions, which by the way is another C. But I can assure you that the Commission, which is the 8th C, will certainly be drawing its conclusions from this meeting. So can I say to our witnesses, Stephen, Janie, Susanna, Jim and Ros, thank you very much indeed for taking the trouble to be here on our first public hearing. Can I say to my colleagues on the Commission, well done. Thank you very much indeed for making it such a good evening. And can I say to our audience, even the naughty ones, thank you very much indeed for making our first public hearing such an excellent start and such a great success. So without further ado, my thanks again, and I declare our Commission meeting well and truly closed. Thank you all very much indeed.
Good luck with it.